All right, here we are. We are live. Let me just go and finish setting things up on YouTube. All right, should be all set. Morning, everybody. I wish there was a way that I could combine the chats so that there's like one chat, both YouTube and TikTok, and then I could look at them both, but I cannot, so here we are. Right, I hope everybody's having a good day. What do you think of Joe Dispenza's teachings? He's a hack. He's not a teacher, he's a grifter. Have you ever been in a secret government project? Just say yes or no. No. Best physics program, UK. It's either Oxford or Cambridge. Like that's a pretty definitively right. What is your exact profession and degree? Well, I have a PhD in physics and a master's in physics and a bachelor's in mathematics and a bachelor's in physics. Currently, my profession is content creator, also known as science communicator, but I'm applying for jobs at universities. It's the summer, and so most times there's not really work during the summer, or rather, they don't hire in the summer. You might have a prolonged contract that works over the summer, but I don't, so applying for jobs for postdoc positions and professorships. Don't most scientists believe in Jesus? No, they do not. Are aliens real? Probably, but I doubt that they've been here. What's your favorite physics fact? That gravity doesn't have to be purely attractive. I mean, it usually is, but it doesn't have to be. What do you think about the connection between philosophy and physics? Philosophy should follow the physics. Do you believe in the moon landing? Yeah, of course. Like, it happened. Like, definitely happened. Can you explain the Higgs field to me in simple terms? Well, no, but I can at least kind of give an analogy. So think of like running at full speed, like sprinting, or like on a field, or sprinting through like molasses. Sprinting through molasses is what the particles that interact with the Higgs field do. And so they slow down, so they can't be moving at the speed of light, which means that they must have mass. Do you think the laws of physics themselves evolve, or are they fixed and eternal? They seem to not be changing. Do most physicists get a minor in math? At what point in their education do they usually start? I don't think most physicists get a minor in math. I majored in math. Make of that what that is. If you got a job at a uni, might you stream less often? I would just stream at a different time. Don't know if they're hiring, but you should come to Dartmouth. Well, I'd love to. Von Braun, the universe should only confirm our belief in the certainty of its creator. Well, that's cool. Von Braun can believe in a god. That doesn't mean most do. Conservation of energy, antimatter, etc. Where does it come from? Well, those are two different things. Conservation of energy is like a empirical law. Namely, like it's a thing that we observe that happens in most laboratories on Earth. And so, you know, we say that this is a law of physics. Now, we know where it comes from. It comes from Noether's theorem. Antimatter, on the other hand, is just a type of particle. So they're kind of different things. Would a spaceship propelled by magnetic force work? Not unless you're near like a very big magnet, I guess. Like if there's a big star with a big magnetic field, then maybe, but could magnetic monopoles exist? They could. We've never seen one though. Have you studied anything else but physics? Mathematics. Does that count? Oh, sorry, I wasn't sorting by... I was sorting by top chat for some reason. There we go. What are the limitations for a fluid to apply Navier-Stokes equations? So it has to be in the continuum limit, meaning that you have to be zoomed out enough, or the particles have to be small enough that it behaves as if you can subdivide it infinitely, that it behaves as if the velocity, for example, can be described by a continuous vector field. There's one other restriction, which is, I think it's a viscosity restriction. Oh, there also has to be a sufficiently weak interaction between the particles in the fluid. So, but I'd have to double check and figure out what the rest of the restrictions are. What the heck is Bluetooth? Bluetooth is short form radio communication. Why can matter get so dense? If you put big enough forces on things, then it doesn't matter how strong the forces are that try to hold something apart, it'll eventually collapse, right? Put a magnetar in a giant copper spool and you have a generator. Oh, yeah, I guess. Would the field of the magnetic monopole decrease with inverse square instead of inverse cube? Yes, that's exactly what would happen. Is there any possibility for a magnet to have more than 2 poles? Yeah, you can have quadrupole magnets, you can have octupole magnets, you can have sextupole magnets, absolutely. Is Euler the most important contributor to science, or is there another guy equal or more important? I mean, arguably Newton or Einstein are the most important contributors to science. All right, George, you're spamming. You get a 5-minute mute. Do you believe in the heat death theory, or the theory that everything will keep evolving and expanding? Well, look, if the universe does keep expanding, then we'll end up with a heat death. However, it's not clear if the heat death will actually happen. Double slit experiment outcome changes when observed or not. Is that because photons interact? Yes, it's because photons interact. Sir, do you ever join to Discord VC and talk to people? Why not do it right now? What? What kind of... Yes, I have Discord servers that I join, but those are with friends. I don't usually join Discord servers to talk with randos because I have better things to do with my time. I've already talked about Atlas I3. It's I3 Atlas. Yes, I did a long time ago when the news first came out. Yeah. Hey, do you think majoring in physics is worth it in terms of industry jobs? It can definitely be helpful, but you'll have a better time if you get an engineering degree. How do you define mass? You can define mass as the quantity of energy that a system has when it's at rest. Do you use Lagrange in your day-to-day? Not directly, no. Do you have any input on the double slit experiment? Input? I mean, like, are you just asking, like, do I have any thoughts on it? Like, the thoughts is that it's exactly what you expect from standard quantum mechanics. Which is why it was actually treated as a thought experiment before it was actually conducted. Is the weak force responsible for gravity? No. No, the weak force has nothing to do with gravity as far as we can tell. I was wondering about population stars. Are there primordial black holes from population stars? So you mean population, so population, are you talking about like population 1, 2, population 3? So primordial black holes, if they exist, would have formed not from stars, but from direct collapse in the very, 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 very early universe. What's the most nonsensical looking thing you know of that consistently works? Renormalization. There's a thing in quantum field theory where basically you take an infinity and you throw it away and then you get a finite answer and it matches with experiments and it works. And that's wonky, but it works. Oh, sorry, my Streamlabs thing isn't working. Let me connect on YouTube really quick. From John Jackson Grieger with the $5. Is the edge of the universe the macro equivalent to the Planck scale? Is there a similar physical principle that these boundaries are rooted in? As far as we can tell, there is no edge to the universe. We don't really have a reason to think that there is an edge to the universe. So this is one of those things where the answer is no, but it's because the question was perhaps ill-posed. Do you have something against Judith Jarvis Thompson? Only that she is the second best JJ Thompson. How are you ordering these questions? Well, I'm getting questions from both YouTube and TikTok, so I'm just taking the questions as they come in. You should be able to pause the chat to answer so you don't get overwhelmed. I don't get overwhelmed. I meant if you will do live streams where you do the same thing as now, but you make stage in a Discord, invite people to join as guests from audience to discuss stuff with you live, because those tend to be, so I occasionally will bring up guests on TikTok, but just generally, no, I'm not going to do that because I'd rather answer questions from text. It's easier to sort through them. Is the Higgs boson a fifth force? No, it's not. So in order to be a force, it has to be represented by a gauge boson, at least in the quantum mechanics sense. And the Higgs boson is not a gauge boson. You're talking about population 3. So population 3 are the youngest, or are the stars that formed in the earliest universe, but no, we don't think that primordial black holes would have formed from them. Have you read the three-body problem? I haven't. Why is the number 137 in so many things? It's not. It only shows up whenever the electromagnetic force is involved, and that's because the number 1 divided by 137 shows up as the strength of the electromagnetic force, basically. And it's not exactly 137. It's 137.0 whatever, like 01 stuff, blah, 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 blah. Wait, edge of the universe, what about bubble nucleus, bubble nucleax and membrane theory? Wouldn't those have borders, edges? So membrane theory wouldn't. Bubble universes might. It depends on what kind of bubble universe we're talking about here. If we're talking about like anti-de Sitter bubble universes, then no, they still don't have an edge. From Sea Lion Prime with the $2, what's your favorite syllogism? All men are mortal, Aristotle, or Socrates is a man, therefore Socrates is mortal. The classic. Did the US hit any real uranium based on the videos that were on the TV? I have no idea what you're asking about. So what even is dark matter? Dark matter is the name that we give to the stuff that has mass that we can't see. Or that we can't detect. Are we in a simulation? I suspect not. Thoughts on Eric Weinstein's paper? It's been thoroughly refuted by a physicist and somebody else who is anonymous. What is the best cheese? I'm quite fond of Swiss. Are there any physics-related advancements, technologies that will have practical business applications in the future? I don't know, probably. What mathematical formula that is not a definition would you use the most in your daily life? The Einstein field equations, that the Einstein tensor is proportional to the stress-energy tensor. Yeah, y'all, if you're watching on YouTube or on TikTok, make sure to like the live. We can get more people and hence more questions and hence better questions that way. Why does the torus show up so consistently in nature? It actually really doesn't. Spheres show up very frequently in nature. Disks show up very frequently in nature. Toruses really don't. Do photons interact and change outcome like in double slit, or other explanation? As a result of interaction, their behavior changes, which is exactly what you would expect. Are the quantum fields expanding? Well, the quantum fields occupy everywhere, occupy all of space, and so if space is expanding, then in a sense, yeah. Isn't mass simply defined as the amount of inertia an object has, aka how much it resists acceleration? Why is this not a sufficient description? You could define it that way, except that that doesn't really work when we start talking about relativity, because the momentum does not change proportionally with the mass given a force. Sorry, how do I want to phrase this? Given a force applied over a time, the momentum does not change proportionally with the mass. I'll put it that way. So the statement that mass is proportional to inertia is only true at low non-relativistic speeds. What do you mean there's no edge of the universe? There's not an edge. As far as we can tell, for absolutely, for good theoretical reasons, we have no reason to think that there's an edge. Either the universe is infinite, in which case, of course it doesn't have an edge, or it's closed, meaning that it's finite in size but has no edge. Think like the surface of the sphere, the surface of the surface of the Earth doesn't have an edge, even though it's finite. What is the writing on your profile picture? It is scratch work that I was doing while doing my PhD. How can we know what exists before the Big Bang? Well, so maybe we can't, because maybe the Big Bang was the first thing. However, it's possible anyway that there was stuff before the Big Bang and it left over kind of residue in the imprint on the matter that arose via the Big Bang. So for example, if there were gravitational waves from a previous universe prior to the Big Bang, then those gravitational waves could, at least in principle, pass through the Big Bang in some sense. Is the gravity at a singularity infinite? Yes, if singularities exist, but I suspect they don't. What about the relationship between space and time? As space is stretched out, what happens to time? Time doesn't do anything. Time is just perfectly well behaved, even though the space is being stretched out. Is dark matter technically faster than light? No. At least we don't have any evidence that it is. Do you have an opinion on what 3I Atlas is? Yeah, it's a natural comet or asteroid or rock. So do we actually not understand why electrons behave differently when observed? No, we do. When you interact with them, their behavior changes, of course. Interaction is a two-way street. You do something to something, it does something back to you. So it's going to change its behavior as a result. That's what observation is. Is it coherent to say that the universe, which includes time, began? Not necessarily. It might not be true. I mean, it could be coherent, but it... well, you could say that time began. I don't know if it makes sense to say that the universe began. Daily hydration reminder from Necti with the $2. Thank you. Thank you for the reminder. Thoughts on Eric Weinstein? Yeah, I think he's a con man as well. What are the chances of a polar flip? Polar flips happen pretty frequently in like geological history. I don't know when we're expecting the next one to happen though. Is chaos theory demonstrated mathematically? Yeah. Chaos theory is just the idea that if you have a dynamic system that's very, very sensitive to its inputs, such that any tiny variation in the inputs dramatically changes the outputs. And that's something that you can describe perfectly well mathematically. From Sea Lion Prime with $5, is the fact that flat earthers share one brain cell collectively proof of quantum entanglement? Yes, yes it is, in fact. Using a computer that took quantum physics to create it, observing an atom with, what? Okay. What does color charge mean? So, look, so the way that we talk about how interactions happen, like, you know, think about like electrons, or think about like magnets attracting, or think about magnets changing the motion of like, I don't know, an electron or like a beam of current, whatever it might be. The way that we talk about these is we talk about fields interacting with things with charges. So the electromagnetic field can only interact with things with electromagnetic charge. Now, the quark field, or sorry, the gluon field, this is the thing that binds quarks together to form protons and neutrons, the strong nuclear force. The charge that's associated with those are called color charges. So there are 3 different color charges, red, green, and blue, and then they have their antis, anti-red, anti-green, anti-blue. They're kind of their negatives. And so if an object has a color charge, and quarks are the only things that do, quarks and gluons, then they will interact with the gluon field. What is your favorite scientist? It's got to be Albert Einstein. The many worlds interpretation. Thoughts? I think that I like it. I'm fond of the many worlds interpretation. Could entropy ever be overcome? In some sense, yeah. It depends on what's allowed in the universe. If you're allowed to have like negative mass matter, then yeah, in principle you can have that. What are your thoughts on the recent stuff that came out about the CMB? I don't know what you're referring to. Could dark matter and dark energy simply not exist and we don't understand the universe correctly? Yeah, in principle. But there's just a lot of like indirect evidence that these things do exist. Blitz PhD, thoughts on scientific racism and the IQ obsession posed by these hustlers? Yeah, I generally think that IQ obsessions are like a sign of low IQ. And scientific racism especially so. People who do scientific racism have badly shaped heads. You know, just saying. What is mirror image charge? Oh, so that's a mathematical trick that you can do to try to solve electromagnetic or try to solve problems in electromagnetism. In layman's terms, edge means that the universe is finite and not the context of a sphere. Wouldn't we call it an edge then? No, so edge doesn't mean finite. Edge means that there's a boundary. Finite, you can have finite things without edges. The surface of a sphere is an example of such a thing. The surface of a donut is an example of a thing. These are finite, but they don't have boundaries. I think that you're the perfect person to ask this. I personally suspect, as someone who loves STEM field, that everything in existence is at essence mathematical. Math is everything, I think. Thoughts? I kind of disagree. I think that math is descriptive, not like ontological. I don't think that it, but you know, that's like a philosophical position. Are there any theorized quantum properties of dark matter, spin particle? There are plenty. There's axions, which is a type of quantum particle that's been proposed since like the 90s, which might be dark matter. There's WIMPs, weakly interacting massive particles. These are particles with high mass that interact only the weak nuclear force. There's a lot of different proposed explanations. We just don't know which they are, or which is correct, if any. Would you be willing to look over some designs I've made for an ion thruster that uses Lorentz force to create it? Lift? I would not. I would not be willing because that would take a lot of time and I'm probably not the right person to do it. What do you think about astral projection? It seems made up. Solve the black hole information paradox right now. No. Is quantum decay truly random? Under kind of the consensus, or under the mainstream view of quantum mechanics, absolutely. Yeah. Possible to do physics science in a garage? Yeah. You'll need a big garage though. How would you study physics up to a PhD level if you did not attend formal education? You wouldn't. Part of getting a PhD in physics is that you have a mentor, right? That's like one of the things that you have to do to get a PhD. And if you don't have a formal education, then you're not going to have a mentor, like a professor who's mentoring you to be a physicist. What are phonons? Are they the quantum of heat? They are the quantum of vibration, which can especially high frequency phonons, can absolutely be thought of as, or you can kind of think of them as like thermal energy, as like being quantized thermal energy, yeah. What was the focus of your PhD thesis and what type of experiments were involved? I'm a theorist, not an experimentalist, so I didn't do any mathematics, or I didn't do any experiments. I was focusing on a particular type of geometry, which has relevance to like string theory and holography. From the brick with the $5, why do you think that we haven't spent more time effort on developing LFTRs? I don't know what an LFTR is, but let's Google it. Liquid fluorine thorium reactor. I have no idea. I don't know a lot about nuclear physics, to be honest. But, you know, as with most things in politics, it's just there's lack of political will, I would suspect. How close is dark matter to Earth? If dark matter is real, which it seems like it is, there would be some dark matter likely in Earth. Why can't electrolysis be used to produce hydrogen from water to power a car? So the amount of energy you have to put in to to separate the hydrogen and the oxygen is more than the amount of energy you get out by burning the hydrogen. So you can use electrolysis elsewhere to create hydrogen and then put that hydrogen in a tube, like in a tank in a car, and then burn the hydrogen to try to, you know, use the hydrogen as fuel. But you can't like use the electrolysis to produce the hydrogen, to burn the hydrogen, to run a car, because the energy that you would get that you require to use for the hydrolysis would be more than the energy that you get from burning the hydrogen in the first place. What do we have to do to publish a paper on physics or math? You have to write one and then submit it to a journal. Do you recommend any techniques, exercises to train yourself to think more creatively? Oh no, I don't know. Former physicist here, what are your thoughts about EDGB black holes? Oh, I haven't read a lot about Einstein, dilaton, Gauss-Bonnet. Like, I haven't. So, I understand that there are a lot of alternative covariant theories of gravity. I'm not like, so if you're a physicist, you know what the archive is. I get like, you know, I get the gravity and cosmology, quantum gravity and cosmology kind of archive feed to my email every day. And like half of the articles that come through there are just, we solve or we modeled this new thing in some random covariant theory of gravity. And I'm like, I don't care. These seem really ad hoc. Like, I get that there are reasons why people are studying like EDGB or like Einstein Gauss-Bonnet or like Gauss-Bonnet gravity or like Starobinsky gravity or rainbow gravity or bumblebee gravity. I get why people are studying these. They're just like, until there's a good reason to think that one is better than the other, like, I don't know, they seem really ad hoc to me. So like, I'll stick with the Einstein field equations. I'll stick with standard, I'll stick with standard GR and study hard problems there. Is it theoretically possible for a black hole to reach a state of critical mass and expel matter rather than consume it? Not under our current theories of gravity, no. Sir, you asked that math is, oh, okay, never mind. Did the Big Bang Theory create something? The Big Bang, so, okay, where's the book? So there's kind of two senses of the Big Bang that people get confused about. There's like the Big Bang singularity, which is what people think of, which is what you're probably asking about. But then there's the Big Bang as physicists understand it. And the Big Bang, why physicists understand it, or as physicists understand it, is just like a theory describing the history of the expansion from a small dense state to now. So in the latter sense, no, the Big Bang didn't create anything. It's just descriptive. In the former sense, I don't even think that there was a singularity to begin with. Are there examples of actual infinities in the real world? Plausibly. I mean, like, consider the number of points in space-time. Could be infinite. Consider the size of the universe. Could be infinite. There's at least no reason why we couldn't have that. Now, the kinds of infinities that are not allowed in the universe are the kinds of infinities that can show up, are the infinities in quantities that could show up on a measuring device. So you will never read infinite pressure, for example. Those kinds, like infinite pressure should never exist because you could have a barometer and you would never be able to detect that. However, there are like, there's no measuring device that you could ever use to measure the size of the universe if the size of the universe is indeed infinite. So there's no reason why that would be a problem. How did the Big Bang overcome gravity? It was very, very hot, and hot things expand, basically. Sir, you said that math is descriptive, but there are many instances of pure math being prescriptive. No, I wouldn't say that it's prescriptive. No. Wouldn't that suggest fast and light expansion? No. Have you read the 3-body problem? I haven't, no, and I don't plan on it. What is nothing? Like, what is beyond the expansion of the universe? There is nothing beyond the expansion of the universe. I don't mean that there is a thing called nothing. I mean, by definition, the universe is everything. So it doesn't even make sense to ask what's beyond it. Was there really a mouse on a SpaceX rocket? If so, how's that possible? I don't think that there was, no. If we publish one with a journal, what is the possibility of it being skyrocketed, or what are some famous journals to publish? Most articles are not read by most people. Most, even like professional scientists who publish, the vast majority of scientific papers get read by like 50 people, maybe. Don't expect your paper to be skyrocketed. That's not like it's not a thing. If that's your goal, you're in the wrong field. Could the Big Bang happen again? Yeah, I suppose. Theoretically, does entropy reach an absolute zero at any point? Well, the second law of thermodynamics requires that, at least in closed systems with, you know, a whole bunch of caveats, that entropy is always increasing. And if entropy is positive now, which it is, then it can't decrease down to zero. Now, you could have a system that has zero entropy. However, that system would be describable by a single state, which would be very strange. From Magnify with the $5, do you agree with allegedly Ian's view that the unbounded time variable in the Schrodinger equation is evidence that the universe has always existed? So this becomes a philosophical question. If it's the case that you can describe a state of the universe at all past times in an unbounded way, then that is just as real as but suppose that the universe didn't exist at those times, it is equivalent to the universe existing at those times, if there is an accurate description of how the universe would have been to get to now from those times. And the reason I say that is because if you say, well, you know, even though the universe looks exactly as if it came from, you know, an eternal past, that doesn't mean it's actually eternal. Well, I can say the exact same thing as, even though my brain is exactly as if I was alive yesterday, it doesn't mean I was alive yesterday. So that's the issue with positing the alternative, that actually, even though the Schrodinger equation describes solutions in an eternal past, that doesn't mean that the universe actually was eternal to the past. I would put forward that it means it just as much as our memories mean that the past exists. Sorry, that was a long answer. Do you think time is discrete or quantized? I am agnostic on the issue. By the way, if you guys are watching for the first time, whether on YouTube or on TikTok, make sure to follow, make sure to subscribe, so you can catch more of these. And if you want to know when I go live, if you want to know when I post a new video, join my Discord server. There's if you're 18 plus anyway, there's a link in the description on the YouTube video to the Discord server. There's also a link in the link tree in my bio, but you have to copy and paste the link from the link tree in my bio. The link, if you click on it, it doesn't work from TikTok. Anyway, but yeah, you should join the Discord server and come and stick around, ask good questions, get good notifications. From supposedly nihilists with the 7 Canuck bucks, Dr. Blitz, if I'm making a Bayesian case for cyclic model cosmology and my friend is asserting quantum foam explaining what we see better, thoughts, you would have to put forward what the evidence is. Like, also, I don't know how quantum foam, like these aren't necessarily in contradiction, right? Do you support string theory? I mean, I don't think string theory is a good description of our universe, but I think that string theory should be supported financially, yeah. I just used the notification bell. Yeah, also ring the bell. Do you think gravity leaks into extra spatial dimensions we cannot perceive? Possibly, but it seems unlikely, given what, you know, the kind of constraints that people have put on those kinds of theories. If multiverse theory is correct, would string theory be a necessity in whole, or would our math need to change between universes? String theory would not necessarily be correct, no. There are a whole bunch of different explanations for how we could have a multiverse, and not all of them rely on string theory. Do you watch Doctor Who? I haven't in a long time. Does the expansion of the universe occur evenly at every location? No. At least in like kind of standard cosmological coordinates, the expansion of the universe only happens in the large vast empty spaces between galaxies and between galaxy clusters. Do you think the term mass should be removed from physics because it has no meaning? It absolutely does have meaning. It's actually an invariant. Do you have thoughts on the study that explores the possibility that the CMB originates from early massive galaxies rather than exclusively the Big Bang? I haven't read it, so I can't really comment. Hi, can you give an overly complicated explanation of how Beyblades work? No. Real science doesn't leave you with paradoxes? Well, The things that a lot of people think are paradoxes are really just misunderstandings. From Fear's interaction with the $10, thank you so much for the generous and continued support. If you were contacted by peaceful extraterrestrials willing to share super advanced technology with all of humanity, would you encourage or discourage them? Funny, I actually just watched an episode of Star Trek: The Next Generation about this. It was the episode where Riker gets caught on a planet and he's injured. So he was doing surveillance on a nearly warp capable but pre-warp civilization. He was, wandering around trying to see what they're like before they do first contact. The episode's called First Contact, by the way. Rivas Lacara, I think was his name. Anyway, so and at the end of the episode, the climax of the episode, the chancellor of that planet says, no, we don't want to be friends with you with the Federation yet because, or no, I'm sorry. During the episode, Picard tells the chancellor that, no, we're not going to give you advanced tech because, having all of this advanced tech super suddenly would just, it would be destructive to your civilization. So what I would recommend that the extraterrestrials do is introduce the technology slowly. Season 4, episode 15, exactly. Yep. That's exactly what it is. How many physicists does it take to change a light bulb? At least one. Negative energy, why aren't we using it more? Well, we don't know how to use negative energy. We don't even know if negative energy exists. What's dark energy? Dark energy is whatever the explanation is for why our universe seems to be expanding. Seems to be accelerating its expansion. Thoughts on YAG lasers? They're cool. I've used them in the past. What do you want to specialize in and why? I'm already specialized. I already have my PhD. I got my PhD a few years ago. I've already specialized. What is 9 plus 10? 21. Do we know how would silicon-based life form look like in comparison to carbon life form? We don't even know how other carbon life would look compared to us. Could antiparticle creation be avoided in matter synthesis if entire atoms are created rather than individual subatomic particles? Not really, because there's still a lot of regular matter particles around here. How many dimensions? At 3 spatial dimensions, 1 dimension of time. What if gravity isn't a force pulling you down, but a memory holding you together? And what if clouds had thoughts? Can you give some uses for ADS in physical systems since we seem to live in de Sitter space? I can't think of any. Like, I actually can't think of any, but it's a useful playground because it has a time-like infinity. A time-like conformal infinity. How hard is it to get into a PhD program? Do you have any tips? I applied to 7, got into 2. I had good grades. I did fairly well on the physics GRE. I had some research experience. I understand it's just getting harder and harder to get into grad school these days, though. So you have to really stand out somehow. Do we have proof of this certification, or did you get it from what? I don't even know what that question means. Could there be a type of physics beyond quantum mechanics that could explain what caused the Big Bang? Maybe. But we don't know. I missed your peer review videos. Yeah, they were just really overwhelming. They were really hard to do. Maybe at some point I'll go back to doing them again, but for now I actually like doing Ask a Physicist twice a week because people have a lot of questions and they seem like really popular with the people. I'm taking AP Physics 1 this year. Any tips for pass? I never took AP Physics 1, so I don't even know what's taught in it. What would we need to discover in order to fully understand gravity like we do with the other fundamental forces? We would need to see some... well, okay, what we would really like to see is see a graviton, but that's probably not going to happen in our lifetimes. It might not ever happen. We would need to see some sort of sign of quantum gravity in some way. What evidence do we have that dark matter is real? Yeah, so dark matter is a category of explanations for a certain set of observations that we make in space. And so the category of observations include things like galaxies seem to rotate faster than they should based off of how much matter that we see. We also seem to see more gravitational lensing than we should in places where we shouldn't see that much gravitational lensing. And we also see a certain amount of mass density that there must have been in the very early universe by looking at the cosmic microwave background radiation. So dark matter is a proposed explanation for why we see those observations. Namely, if it's the case that there is just matter that's basically invisible, that is, but still interacts gravitationally, then we would expect that galaxies would rotate faster than we think that they should. We would expect more gravitational lensing and so on. So dark matter is the proposed explanation for those things, or it's one proposed explanation for those things. Oh, you don't know what the question means. Where's the certification? Where's your doctorate? Oh, my doctorate is somewhere in this room. I'd have to find it. But no, I'm not reading anything off of AI. Otherwise, you know, AI isn't that fast. I'm significantly faster than AI. Is there legitimate research into the origin of the Big Bang? Can there even be? Yeah, of course there is. There's so much. So many people do research about that, about like what may have caused the Big Bang and things like that. It's mostly theoretical work because we are limited in our observations, but of course there's plenty of research. Basic question, but since the local entropy can decrease if the total entropy increases, if the multiverse theory was real, could our universe be taken as a local point, hence decrease in entropy? Yes, that is a thing, but the entropy of our universe isn't decreasing. Where'd you get your PhD in physics from, and what was your dissertation and or specialization about physics? I'm not going to tell you where I got my degree from. People already send me death threats. I got a new one yesterday. I'm not going to dox myself. But my specialization was in, I did differential geometry with applications towards holography. So make of that what you will. There was no Big Bang. Big Bang is a dumb theory. Big Bang is a brilliant theory. It makes really, really good predictions about the world around us. Can dark matter cancel out anything else? I don't know what you mean by cancel out. Not really, though, if I'm interpreting you correctly. Have you ever read the Feynman lectures? No, I haven't. And they weren't actually written by Feynman. I'm trying to prove that gravity isn't emergent from E&M. Any literature suggestions? Not that I can think of. I mean, like, basically, all you have to do... Well, okay. I mean, like, it's sort of already been done, considering that, like, there are various Cavendish experiments that control for electromagnetism, for electromagnetic effects. There was one conducted by the Eot-Wash group. Oh, I don't know how many years ago it was. But basically, they used, like, a tiny gold sphere, or two tiny gold spheres, and measured the attractive force between them, and basically accounted for all of the magnetic and electric charge, or the magnetic fields and the electric charges. So, how can scientists study or detect dark matter if it doesn't emit light and can't be observed directly? So we can observe it indirectly via things like gravitational lensing. So if you have a lot of mass somewhere, then that mass can distort light as the light passes by it. And so even if we can't see the thing that has the mass, we can at least see the effect that it has on light, for example. Is theoretical chemistry dead? I don't know. Probably not. Why are you getting death threats? Because some people are hateful. What's a Poisson bracket? I'm trying to learn it for non-equilibrium thermodynamics. So a Poisson bracket is a relation between vector fields in a symplectic manifold. It's a binary operation is basically what it is. Now, if you're asking what it physically means, I don't really have good intuition for that. I guess the way to think about it is that if you treat one of the elements of the Poisson bracket as a generator, then it tells you how the other... If you treat one of the entries of the Poisson bracket as a generator, it tells you how the other entry changes with respect to that generator, I suppose. But I don't really have good intuition for that, especially for non-equilibrium thermodynamics. I'm not, like, my weakness in physics is non-equilibrium, or is just thermodynamics in general, statistical mechanics as well. What's the difference between a black hole and a primordial black hole? A black hole is just, or a primordial black hole is a type of black hole that didn't arise via, say, a star exploding and then collapsing. A primordial black hole would be a black hole that arose in the very, very, very first few moments of the universe's existence, or, you know, a few fractions of a second after the Big Bang, and formed via gravitational collapse directly. Is PhD in physics worth it? Do you enjoy it? If you went back, what would you do differently? I mean, it is worth it if you love it. That's what it boils down to. You don't do this for the money, right? But yes, I did enjoy it. If I went back, what would I do differently? I wouldn't change much. I'd probably be more diligent, though. But that's what everybody says about everything. How to comprehend 4D? Human brains are not really good at that, so don't worry about it. Are you a theoretical physicist? I'm a mathematical physicist, so you could say so, yeah. Why do you have trouble understanding concepts in thermodynamics? I just had bad teachers, and I never found the topic particularly interesting. I'm not sure if I'm not sure if I would say I had trouble understanding concepts. It's just the teachers I had were not very compelling, and so I just found the whole topic boring, and I never bothered to learn it very well. In what type of black hole does our universe exist? I don't think our universe does exist in a black hole. In fact, I have a project that's kind of stewing in the back of my head. I think that it's possible to prove that we don't live in a black hole if general relativity is true. I think that it's possible to prove, given recent observations. But, you know, I'll let it stew in the back of my head for a few months, and then I'll write a paper in a few weeks. And how hot? No. Do you think it's worth it to take a real class in quantum mechanics when there's a 6-year-old MIT free online course? Yeah, probably, because you can ask questions in a real class. Do you believe in the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics? Yeah, I lean that way. If you fell into a black hole, as gravity approaches infinity, would the time not slow infinitely? So time is, the rate at which time flows is always relative. So as you are approaching the event horizon, your time will appear to slow relative to somebody else, relative to somebody very, 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 very far away. Somebody arguably infinitely far away. Your time will slow and then approach 0. However, from your perspective, you have no problem. You just pass right through. So make of that what you will. It's very, very weird. You're not a physicist. You drop out. Fascinating, but okay. I'm glad you think so. Why does my paper plane not have business class? Great question. Maybe you should build one. Are we chasing our tails with quantum gravity? I suspect not. Look, so there's kind of two. I've never really seen, what do I want to say? I've never really seen a satisfactory explanation for how gravity could work in light of the fact that we know quantum systems have quantum behavior. Like, we know that electrons can be in some sense 2 places at once. And so then the question would be, if there's no quantum gravity, how do you make sense of that? Where, like, you know, electrons have mass, so they gravitationally attract things, at least in principle they should. Where would a thing be attracted to if the electron is in 2 places at once, right? We need a way to make sense of that. That's like pretty evidently the case. Opinion on BGV theorem. My understanding is it's not actually a proven theorem. There are loopholes, which means it's not a theorem. But Blitz, you don't need schooling. You can just ask AI the questions instead. Oh boy. You're so mean to me. Oh, did I miss a super chat? No, I did not miss a super chat. By the way, if you guys like what you're seeing, make sure to like the live, whether you're on TikTok or on YouTube. Make sure to like the live, follow, subscribe, ring the bell, all of these things, so you can get more announcements about these kinds of things, and we can get more people involved in these question and answer sessions. Are black holes like quantum erasers? Most physicists suspect not. This is the black hole information paradox, and most physicists who at least study the thing think that the black hole information paradox is resolved somehow. Depending on who you ask, you'll get different resolutions. Who decided how far a mile is? All verbal language is just made up. I think the Romans did. Hey, I recently joined undergrad research program in nanoparticles and plasmonics. I'm currently pursuing mechanical engineering. Do you think it's a good idea should switch to physics for my master's? If you love it, yeah, absolutely. That's a really hot field right now. So you would be not short on research positions. Can you explain the double slit experiment, things only existing if being observed? That's not what the double slit experiment's about. The double slit experiment is merely the idea that all quantum objects are waves, so they interact with each other. However, if you localize that quantum object by like interacting with it, by like measuring where it is, which has an effect on the quantum object, then it will behave like a smaller localized wave. Would a warp bubble negate inertia? Inertia might not even be really well defined in a space-time like that. How can Hawking radiation be measured to be informationless? Most people think that it's not informationless. What's your most creative paper title? If I told you that, then you'd be able to find my name. You need a PC to use the moving backgrounds that you occasionally do. I have a PC. Why does time slow down near a black hole? Right, so in fact, the way that we describe gravity, kind of like the high-level interpretation of gravity, is that gravity is what happens when the time warps in the space direction. Or put another way, gravity is what happens, like standard gravity, where the thing that makes you fall. Standard gravity is what happens when straight paths in time become straight paths in space, which means that you're traveling less through time. Now, near a black hole, you travel a lot less through time. Do you subscribe to the Copenhagen interpretation of quantum mechanics? I do not. Do you believe in space and did we go to the moon? Both of those things are obviously true, yes. Are you a Linux, Mac, or Windows guy? I'm a Windows guy. But your name is Dr. Blitz. Right, my first name is Doctor, my last name is Blitz. You got me. Who built the PC that is running the simulation we are in? I don't think that we're in a simulation. And I think that there's actually good reason to think that we aren't. I think that there's good empirical reasons. What would you say to look into studying EM and optics? Take an electromagnetism course, of course. From Atarax, with the $5, thank you. Please explain how gravitational attraction is explained by more curvature of the time aspect of spacetime than the space aspect of spacetime. Right, so the time aspect is, this is basically because the speed of light is really big. So all of the effects that happen in gravity, so the way that, let me back up. The way that we describe gravity is with something called a metric tensor. Now the metric tensor basically tells you how much distances and durations contribute, or how much changes in location contribute to distances and durations. Now, in order for the thing to make sense mathematically, the time bits have an extra factor of c squared there, of the speed of light squared. So in any normal gravitational system, the time bit will be massively dominant because you're multiplying it by c squared. Whereas the space bit might be very, very small. This is why Newtonian gravity is what happens if you only include the time bit and not include the space bit. And so at low gravitational masses, at low speeds, the time bit is the same thing, both in Einstein's case and in Newton's case, which is why Newton got the answer basically right. He just left out some stuff that he didn't know about. Einstein had to tweak it a little bit because there's some higher order corrections that occur at high speeds or at high masses, and those are the space bits, basically. Why do galaxies further away give off more red light? It's not that they give off more red light. It's that the light that they emit is made more red. So distant galaxies have a lot of space between us and them. And because there's a lot of space, that region of space is getting bigger faster. Think of like doubling the size of 1 inch versus doubling the size of a foot. If you double the size of a foot, you're growing that foot faster than if you double the size of an inch. Anyway, so the space between us and very, very distant galaxies is growing very, very quickly. So it stretches the light more and makes it redder. They can't get past the radiation belt still? Of course they can. Like obviously we can send stuff past the Van Allen belts. The Van Allen belts aren't even that dangerous. I mean, like, you wouldn't want to hang out there for like several days, but you can pass the Van Allen belts, no problem. You'll be okay. Would redshift cause a conservation of energy problem? Yes. For an outside observer, would someone who fell into a black hole not have an infinite lifespan? They would. They would also slow down and cease to exist, essentially. What happens to the energy lost to redshift? It's gone. Name 2 SI-based units. Ampere, meter. Some people get really upset that ampere is a base unit of SI, and they claim that coulomb should be. But I think that it's technically official that the ampere is the base unit. And that a coulomb is just an ampere second. If we're not in a simulation, what are we in? We're in a universe. Hey, has the expansion of spacetime ever been confirmed with the distance increasing over 30 years or so? Like, look at one with Hubble in 1990 and then look. So it's not really feasible. So the Hubble constant tells you how fast the universe is currently expanding. It's about 70 kilometers per second per megaparsec. What that means is that if something is a megaparsec away, which is about 3.5 million light years, then the speed, or then it will be moving away from us at 70 kilometers per second. So over 30 years, we could figure out how much further away it should be, and it'll be like a tiny, tiny, tiny distance that we could never even in principle measure. Coulomb is charge, amps is flow. No, yes, that's exactly it. But for some reason, amp is an SI base unit. Unless they changed it recently. I know that this was the case like 5 years ago. What is your opinion on the thought that our universe might be in a black hole? I think that it's false. So long as general relativity is true, I think I have good reason to think that we can actually prove that we're not in a black hole. How do I send a super chat? You have to be on YouTube. So just for those who don't know, if you have a burning question that you must get answered, go to YouTube, send me $2, and it will pop up and I'll answer it right first. I mean, like, I gotta provide some incentive for people to support the live stream, of course. Do you have an idea on what time in a universe with a metric signature of plus, 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 minus, minus would be like? It would be, well, you'd be able to turn around in time. You'd be able to go backwards in time, which would be very, very confusing. So I don't even know what, I don't even know what dynamics would be like. Those are so-called, not hyperbolic. Oh no, those are so-called ultra hyperbolic systems, and those don't have well-defined like initial data. So is it possible to leave the planet and not come back and leave the rest? Okay, that's a weird question. Smolin thinks our universe came from a black hole. I'm aware. How to make my parents allow me to major in physics rather than engineer? Tell them that all physicists can be engineers, not all engineers can be physicists. Do you think a new math will need to be discovered to solve the theory of everything? Maybe. It wouldn't be the first time that physicists have invented math. How hot is the Van Allen belt, and how hot can materials handle of a ship? That's a good question. So the Van Allen belt is like 10 to 30,000 degrees, or 10 to 30,000 Kelvin, which is very hot, and you'd think that you would like die if you went there instantly. But it's not just about heat. It's not just about temperature. It's about how quickly how much energy can be transferred from that 30,000 Kelvin plasma to the thing. In order for something to melt, it needs to absorb that heat. And there's just not enough heat in the entire Van Allen belts to melt a ship. And the way that we know this, by the way, is the total mass of the Van Allen belt is about the mass of a donut. It's like about the size of a donut, or the mass of a donut, not the size. So all of that mass spread over hundreds of thousands of square, or perhaps even millions of square or cubic miles, means that there's just basically no particles there. Even though the particles themselves have a lot of energy, there's like basically none of them. So they just don't transfer energy very efficiently. From Guess Art with the $2, what's the biggest mystery in physics today? I would say probably the most famous, one of those famous mysteries is what dark matter is. Because we don't know what it is. Do we really understand the laws of gravity? Well, we understand classical gravity really well, yeah. The no-hair theorem really reminds me of particles, so why not model black holes with quantum fields? People have tried. The equations that govern the geometry of black holes just don't agree with quantization if you try to do that. I don't know why I don't know why they say astronauts can't get through it then. I don't know who said that astronauts can't get through it. NASA says they don't have the science to get through the Van Allen belts. They came out and said they can't get through the Van Allen belts. No, they didn't. They said that there are still problems to work on to handle the Van Allen belts, and that's because of our tech. Our tech is more advanced, and more advanced tech is more susceptible to high levels of radiation, which the Van Allen belt does have lots of radiation, but it's not a heating issue. From the brick with the $5, if you were given the opportunity to become a von Neumann probe, would you, i.e. a Bobaverse? To become one? I don't know. I don't think I would. No, that'd be weird. And from Zach Charlson with the $5, do you have a good grasp on physics in undergrad, or did it take some time currently in undergrad and sometimes have a sense of imposter syndrome? I did pretty well in undergrad. That said, there's always things to learn. And everybody always has imposter syndrome. All the time, the whole time. Dark energy is bigger, you're spoofing. Maybe dark energy is a bigger mystery, possibly. From Glowstick with the $5, could you help me dispel the idea that the moon affects the human body? Idea is moon affects tides, water, and the human body is 70% water, blah, blah, blah. Okay, yeah. So all you have to do is just go look at your pool in your backyard or in your local swimming pool. You will find that there are no tides. And that pool is bigger than you. Are you just hoovering for cash? I mean, no, I answer a lot of questions that are not donations, but you know, if people want to support the live stream, I'm not going to say no. From Henry Mead with the £2 what are quasi-particles? This is actually a really good question. So a quasi-particle is a thing, it's an excitation of perhaps multiple particles. So like, think of like, okay, let me give an example. Think of like a crystal, like a cubic crystal. So you have like a salt crystal, for example. You could imagine that like, you could have like a vibration that's kind of moving like a particle would. So like, or actually think like a slinky. You can do like a little, like if you have a slinky stretched out, you can kind of bump one side and you'll have like a little like high density chunk that moves along the slinky, and that will kind of behave like a particle. It obeys certain equations and so on, but it's made of a whole bunch of more fundamental particles. So a quasi-particle is just any kind of excitation like that has particle-like traits and is, quantized in some sense, but is actually made of smaller particles, or arises from the interactions of many smaller particles. What is dark photon theory? So dark photons are a proposed explanation for dark matter. The idea is that there's kind of like a dark sector of particle physics. We have all of these particles, but it's possible that there's just a whole bunch of particles that we can't interact with. And if that's the case, then there could be dark photons. These are particles that are identical in every way to our photons, except they don't interact with our charge, but there's just a different kind of charge that they interact with. If that's the case, then you can end up with very, very strange situations where these dark photons can actually, dark photons and other dark particles can explain dark matter. Lol, okay, my guy. Appreciate you. Crazy what we did in the 60s and 70s when we didn't have the processing power of one cell phone between the whole control center, didn't even have AC in cars. The point is to go to the moon, you don't actually need a lot of processing power. You just need huge rockets. And in fact, having a like kind of low-tech electronics is actually helpful for getting through the Van Allen belts, because the bigger the components, like if you have big resistors or big computer chips, or they didn't even have computer chips at the time. If you have like big, triodes and big electronic things, those things are less susceptible to radiation. And so whereas once you start making things like microscopic, now even a single particle of radiation can damage them and can change their behavior. So it really does actually help. We got a few super chats that I need to read really quick. From Christian Chavez with the $2, are white holes possible in our universe? Not really. There's basically two reasons why. One, we don't have any theoretical explanation for how they would even in principle form. Gravity, black holes are easy to explain how they form because gravity is attractive, pulls them together. A white hole would have to collapse to a point, even though the gravity is repulsive. Second, if white holes existed, they would be super, super bright, and we don't have any data that they'd be so bright that we would see them, and we've never seen them. So we don't really have a good reason to think that they're possible. From Daniel Moser with the $2, thank you. From Anthony Morgan with the $10, no question, just supporting your research, keep cooking. Praise Doug and Einstein, the most underrated physicist. Einstein is indeed the most underrated physicist, next to Doug. No, I'm kidding. From Jason Y. Amir with the $5, thank you. If as light reaching us shows the past, how could we perceive an object approaching us on a cosmological scale, i.e. Andromeda? Well, you can just check to see what color the light is. So it turns out that if something is moving away from you, the light will get redder. If something's moving towards you, the light will get bluer. You can check Andromeda's light is bluer. Also, you can just do some modeling and show that Andromeda is close enough that there's a gravitational attraction between the Milky Way and Andromeda. Have you read Road to Reality yet? No, I haven't. Could it be possible that a white hole is too bright that we cannot see it? The brighter it is, the easier it is to see. Can you talk about virtual particles that pop in and out of existence? No, because virtual particles are made up. They're made up lives by theoretical particle physicists, and you shouldn't believe them. It's not a conspiracy. The idea of virtual particles basically stems from a mathematical trick that particle physicists use, but you don't have to use that mathematical trick, meaning that you don't have to invoke virtual particles in order to explain the world around us. So that gives us good reason to think that virtual particles are not actually a thing. Is it possible that an eternal universe is compatible with a theory of time? Sure, I don't see an issue. Could it be we've never seen a white hole because it actually leads to another universe? A white hole spews things out, it doesn't let things in. White holes wouldn't lead anywhere. There's no inside of a white hole, roughly. I mean, there kind of is, but it's complicated. Is it true that a Star Trek style nanoassembler disassembler is impractical and impossible due to the energy requirements to break and form bonds is so high it would incinerate the output? That seems plausible. When solving physics equations, we often discard negative time as non-physical, but if math isn't wrong, could negative time be real in a universe beyond our laws? Maybe, I guess. From Atarax with the $2, thank you. If you went FTL, are you actually going back in time? I guess, but you can't go FTL. So And you're not even necessarily going back in time. It's just from somebody's perspective, you might go back in time. Is there a way to explain Hawking radiation without virtual particles? There is, and I've made a video about it. It relies on quantum tunneling, essentially. Do you think the laws of physics are discovered truths about reality or human-made models that just happen to work, and how could we ever know the difference? That is a philosophy question. Generally, my view is that I think that the more accurate our laws of physics get, the more accurate our predictions get, the closer we're getting to touching on something fundamental, but I don't think that they're discovered truths in a sense. I mean, okay, in some sense they're discovered regularities, but I don't think that the laws of physics are out there. And from helping Maga deconstruct with the $5, I love how people with no college degree say you were wrong in the comments. Praise Doug and Sharon Stone. Based. I appreciate that. Do you think we are actively training Laplace's demon by using LLMs? No. Laplace's demon isn't a bad thing either. Can we peek around the edges? The edges of what? Explain the reason for matter, antimatter asymmetry in the universe. If I could do that, I wouldn't be here answering questions. I would be out winning a Nobel Prize. We don't know. This is one of the big problems, right? One of the big questions. Do you know more than Bill Nye the Science Guy? Probably. What do you think about the hypothesis that dark matter are just WIMPs? I think that it's a reasonable idea. Is there an easier way to get the plastic seal off a bottle of Jack Daniels? It seems they're sealed by Satan himself. No, there is no easier way. What's the latest update on 3i Atlas? I haven't been following it because it's not very interesting. Almost certainly it's a natural object. I would put large sums of money on it being a natural object. The only people who are pushing that it's not are people like Avi Loeb and the people in his circle. And he's just loud. He's not the majority. He's also not often right. In fact, every single time that we've had an extraterrestrial like object, sorry, not extraterrestrial, extrasolar object enter our solar system, Avi Loeb has called it an alien every single time, and he's been wrong every single time. Do you know Jorge Physics? I do. I mean, like, not personally, but we're mutuals and we've interacted before, and you know, I consider him a casual friend. Is the model of the universe expansion truly false? It's not false. I don't know why you would say it's false. He's responding to Twitch questions. No, I'm responding to YouTube questions. What are you researching now? I'm researching, there are a few different topics. So I'm working on a topic where I'm trying to use a simple quantum gravity model to explain Hawking radiation. I'm working on a project, it's fairly mathematical and fairly technical, trying to establish gap theorems for Einstein manifolds. What other projects do I have going on right now? And then there are a few projects that I'm working on trying to finish, basically. Can you give an example of superpositioning? Yes, and this is a super easy example if you recognize that superposition is just what happens when waves overlap. So imagine that you play a chord on a guitar. So each string is producing one sound wave, say. Suppose it's a pure sound wave, a pure sine wave. When you play them all together, the air will be in a superposition of different sound waves. And we can hear that. Are you a fan of Carl Sagan? He was one of the greats, yeah. Is a dinosaur a dragon? Depends, I guess. These are just words that mean things, right? Who do you think is the most overrated and most underrated public science educator? Most overrated public science educator. Maybe Ashley here on TikTok, or maybe Sabina Hossenfelder on YouTube. And the most, or maybe Michio Kaku. It feels bad saying that, but maybe Michio Kaku. And the most underrated, well, I'm sure that there are some that are way more underrated that are like really big deals and, or that are really good but have tiny followings. But I think that Matt O'Dowd from PBS Spacetime is really good, and he should be more popular than he is. I think that he's one of the best that we currently have, actually. Why doesn't the constellations ever change if the universe is expanding? The constellations do change. In fact, we can measure the motion of the stars. But all of the stars that we see are in our local galactic neighborhood, and so they're not susceptible to the expansion. Expansion is a thing that happens between galaxies. Would you still be doing live after winning a Nobel Prize? Maybe. Maybe. If light is self-propagating and doesn't need a medium, why does it interact with medium still? It doesn't need a medium, but light interacts with anything with charge. So anything with charge can interact with it and will affect it. If UAPs could actually produce a gravitational field, would that actually negate air drag? No. Will we ever discover exotic matter? If it exists, maybe we will, but if it doesn't exist, then no. Is time travel real? You can travel forward in time, no problem. We're doing that right now, but time travel to the past, probably not. From Maxim Ward with the 5 British pounds, can you explain the Planck length? For example, is there a Planck angle, e.g. the smallest amount you could rotate an object? So the Planck length is not the smallest distance that you could travel. Has nothing to do with that. The Planck length is merely a natural unit of length that incorporates a lot of the scientific, or a lot of the kind of the fundamental constants. Basically, you know how like speed of light has meters per second? Well, if you could find some constant that was just in seconds or in inverse seconds, you could combine them to make just meters. So that's what the Planck length does. It uses the gravitational constant because that has kilograms, meters squared per second squared. Sorry, the gravitational constant has newtons, meters squared per second squared. It involves the speed of light, which is meters per second. Sorry, it doesn't involve the speed of light. That's the Planck time. It involves the Boltzmann constant, which is joules per Kelvin. No, it doesn't involve the Boltzmann constant. It involves the Planck constant, which is joule seconds. So anyway, you basically just combine a whole bunch of different constants and you get something out that has units of distance. And it happens to be very, very small. And the way that you can interpret that scale, that size, is it has something to do with when we expect gravitational effects to be relevant at the quantum scale. Like, over what distances should gravitational effects be relevant? Now, gravity is geometry, so you might say, well, maybe the geometry just breaks down at distances smaller than that, but we don't have any reason to think that. Like, we have some intuition perhaps, but we don't have any like formal proof that that's actually what happens. As far as Planck angles, no, there's no such thing. Atarax with the $2 again, what do you think causes Nobel syndrome? I have no idea. I think actually it probably happens to more people than you'd think. It's just very famous for Nobel Prize winners because people look to them as like the paragons of brilliance. Do you wear glasses so you can seem intelligent? No, I wear glasses because I'm blind without them. How much money am I missing out on by not being a physicist? Not much. How do we get to know the spin of the electron as a half? You can measure it. You can basically directly measure it by measuring how magnets affect them. Basically, there's other ways to more indirectly measure it, but yeah, magnets will basically do the job for you. Have you ever considered getting jacked, being smart and jacked to school? I am working on it. It's hard though, it takes a lot of time. What do you use against Cynthia's Garchomp? I don't know what that is. Can we stabilize wormholes without exotic matter? Not as far as I know. Is quantum eternity theorem confirmed? I mean, it's a theorem. It's a mathematical theorem. It's true. The question is are the hypotheses satisfied? That we don't know. The Planck area is actually smaller, more compact than the Planck length is long. Well, that's not true. It doesn't even make any sense to compare them. A Planck area is just the area given by a square with side length of 1 Planck length. Do you think you need a degree to be knowledgeable about physics? In principle, no, but in practice, yes. If a galaxy is multiple billion light years away, shouldn't that distance increase by a lot over 30 years? Well, why don't we do the calculation, right? Let's just do the calculation, right? Pull out a calculator, open up Maple, do a calculation, see how much over 30 years. Let's say it's 1 megaparsec away, right? So if it's 1 megaparsec away, then we have 70 kilometers per second. We want to multiply this over 30 years. So there's 3,600 seconds in an hour, 24 hours in a day, 365 days in a year, and 30 years in 30 years. And so what we would find is that the galaxy would be moving away from us 70 kilometers per second. Yeah, the galaxy would be moving away from us at much. That number seems too big. Hold on, now I'm thinking. Oh no, I'm sorry. We're talking about distance. I just figured out how much further away it would be, not how much faster it'd be going. I dropped my units. So if it's 1 megaparsec away from us now, then it's moving away from us at 70 kilometers per second. Now, what that means, practically speaking, is that it's 66 billion kilometers further away. But that's less than a single light year, right? So, you know, it hasn't really changed its position. Oh yeah. So even if it were 1,000 light years further away, let's say that we do a gigaparsec away, a few billion light years away. Again, it would be less than 1,000 light years further away, which is smaller than a galaxy. So it'd hardly move. Do the socks in the middle of the pack technically not exist since no one has ever seen them? Yes, that's true. Yeah. People fail to understand the vastness of space. Very true. Yeah. Can you explain current in solid state devices? No, I can't, because I've never heard of that. Then why does it seem the same brightness in the night sky? Why does what seem the same brightness in the night sky? Oh, because, well, so the things that are a billion light years away, we can't see, right? Do you play an instrument? If not, what would you pick? I used to play guitar. I played guitar for a while. I haven't played since grad school. Do you know much on the EM drive? I know enough to know that it's almost certainly not a real working thing. Thank you for the Galaxy NASA payroll. I appreciate that. That's really funny, by the way. That's like exceedingly funny. If NASA paid via TikTok awards, that would be amazing. If you could have one question about the universe answered, what would it be? I'd like to know what quantum gravity is. As a physicist, do you believe in God, Jesus? I do not. Does time objectively determine reality? No. You believe in a higher being, aka God? I do not. Any thoughts on Thomas Kuhn? Nope. How strong is the theory of the multiverse? It's pretty popular, but there are some very, very loud retractors or detractors. What is the most interesting applications of quantum entanglement? Encryption. Do you have any physics engineering projects for a research paper? Yeah, I have several. I have several that I'm currently working on. Do you think our thoughts are the most powerful thing in the universe? I don't even think you could quantify how powerful they are. I don't think that they are like powerful. I don't think that's a good description. Can you even prove the multiverse theory? Is it even scientific? Yeah, it is scientific. If the theory makes predictions about our universe, then you could test those predictions. Do you recommend community college for the first couple years of college or no? I don't. I understand that that's a privileged point of view. If you can afford it, go to a university for the first couple years, because your first year or two is going to involve introductory courses, but those are the people who are teaching those at universities are still going to be researchers, and it'd still be good to learn from them and still be good to ask them questions and get to know them, especially if you want to be involved in academia. Fellow physicist, I've been very skeptical in quantum computing lately. Thoughts? I don't know what there is to be skeptical about. I mean, like, we know quantum computing is real. It works. It's just, you know, it's not like, it's not going to be like a brand new revolution like the microprocessor revolution was, but it's still useful. It still has relevant applications. Is there a real possibility of the simulation theory being reality? I don't think so. Please explain how a multiverse is scientific. It is outside of our observable universe. Look, so if the theory that predicts a multiverse also predicts things about our universe, then we would have reason to think that the theory is correct, and then we would have reason to believe the predictions of the theory. The Planck length is extremely small. Squaring it results in an even smaller number. So the Planck length, so you can't compare sizes that have different units. That'd be like comparing a gallon to a meter. You can't say a gallon is bigger than a meter, even though if you take a cubic meter, a gallon is smaller than a cubic meter. It's just not an apt comparison. From Atarax with the $10, thank you. I gotta go, but thank you for the answers. Been fascinated by physics my whole life, but never got a degree. Wish I had a physicist to ask so many times. Sub to keep it up. It's Ataraxic. Okay, got it. Thank you, and thank you for the $10. Are we living in a holographic universe? I suspect not. What happens to the stretched universe in expansion? I don't see a balloon. I don't see the balloon example as helpful. I don't know what you mean by what happens to it. You already kind of answered it, right? The idea is that the universe is expanding. So that means that between two distant objects, they get further away as the universe expands. Such is the nature of things, right? If string theory proves different dimensions, does that prove multiverse? Not directly, no. What do you think about string theory versus loop quantum gravity? Which one do you think works better? String theory objectively works better. Like it's just been worked on more, it has more results. But loop quantum gravity is in some sense nicer. And loop quantum gravity, I think, actually is at least plausibly a theory of quantum gravity in our universe. String theory doesn't seem like it is. What is a Christoffel symbol in GR? A Christoffel symbol tells you how a vector pointing in this direction changes its direction and length as you move it in a vector that's pointing in some other direction, as you move it in a different direction. Roughly. Do you swallow spiders when you sleep? No, so there's a common misunderstanding, actually. So let me just make sure that I read the right thing. So look, so there's a common misunderstanding. So the quote, the average person eats 3 spiders a year, factoid is actually just statistical error. The average person eats 0 spiders per year. Spiders Georg, who lives in a cave and eats over 10,000 each day, is an outlier and should not be counted. I love that meme. From Aronomations with the 10 CHF, which I don't know what that is. Thanks for answering my questions about distance over 30 years. I see now. That was something my dad asked me and I didn't know what to say. Fair enough. And from Andrew Fulton with the $5. If the Big Bang and Big Crunch theory were true, do you believe it plays out the same way every time? Example, will you be born again? It depends on the model. So in some models, the model that I recently made, it will play out the exact same way every time. In other models, it will not. In other models, it's like a kind of like, it's not like actually cyclic. It's just kind of like a repeated kind of series of events. Addon should not be counted. True. How easy is it to get a job after getting a degree in physics? Depends on what kind of degree you have. If you have an undergraduate degree, it's actually not as easy as getting a degree as if you had an engineering degree, say. If you have a PhD, you could probably get, or a master's, you could probably get a degree, get a job in most places. But academic jobs are tricky. Being a specialist in something doesn't mean you actually have all knowledge on a subject. To believe so would be idiocracy. Yeah, that's true. Do you believe in aliens? I think that aliens probably exist, but I doubt they've been here. Can you explain John Clauser, Elaine Aspect, and Anton Zellinger's 2022 Nobel Prize Award? Yeah, so basically their award was given for work done in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. And what they did in those years was they finally did precision Bell test experiments. What that means is that they ran experiments that kind of fundamentally can distinguish between classical physics and quantum physics. What they showed is that fundamentally our universe is quantum mechanical in nature. They did loophole-free Bell test experiments is what they're called. Please explain how quantum superposition, how and how can a particle be in 2 different places? Because a particle is not a little ball in space, it's a wave. How much utility is there in measuring the speed of light to increasing degrees of precision? There is 0 utility in it because the speed of light is known to infinite precision, interestingly enough. The speed of light is known to be exactly 299 million, and I'm going to read off the rest of the digits. It's exactly equal to 299,792,458 meters per second. It's exactly that. How can a wave be physical? You think like a wave can't... What do you think sound is? What do you think a surfer is surfing on? What? What they show is that oh, that wasn't a question. Do you think consciousness can potentially be explained with quantum mechanics? I suspect not. Incorrect, that's what we can measure. No, this is the speed of light. This is what the speed of light is exactly, actually. Are the stars in water? No. I mean, there is water out in space, but not very much. Big fan of your videos. Thanks for doing them. Of course. Thank you for watching. How do 2 entangled particles communicate info without with each other from across the universe instantly without violating constant? They don't communicate information. That's the important point. How do you become confident to give talks and presentations as a PhD student? So I was very, very nervous the first time I did this. And what my advisor had me do in like my second to last year of my PhD, or actually I think it was like near the end of my PhD actually, was he just, no, actually we started this 2 years before, or the second to last year. So he started a journal club and he basically had each of us just read some papers and then give a lecture on it. And because there were only like 5 people there, it was him and then like a few of his other grad students and like one other faculty member. It was a low stakes environment, and you could get used to talking about technical subjects in front of some people. And then, you know, at the end of the at the end of my PhD, my advisor said, look, you got to give a talk on your PhD research, or at least on something on it. And then there were 20 people there, or 15 people there. It wasn't my dissertation defense. It was like just like kind of a colloquium, or like a seminar talk. And so it's just a matter of just doing it over and over to ever larger groups. And then eventually you do it in front of a group of 150 people and you're fine. Because it turns out when you're asked to give a research talk, you actually know what you're talking about. If light moves, it has mass, right? No, light does not have mass. Dr. Blitz, does the way Christian apologists abuse philosophy turn you off from philosophy as being useful, or do you separate their abuse from philosophy proper? Yeah, I separate their abuse, of course. Do we live in a random universe? I suspect not. What's your favorite topic in classical mechanics? Probably Keplerian orbits. Do you have a live schedule? Yeah, I'm live I'm live five days a week during the, Monday through Friday, at 9 a.m. California time, which will change once, I'm in Arizona, so that'll change once we change times again. Can you debunk that debate that they can build a Dyson sphere around the sun? Yeah, there's just not enough material to build a Dyson sphere around the sun. Not enough material in the solar system. What does negative temperature look like? It looks like a quantum system that is highly energized. Last time I watched, you were in like Portugal or something. When did you move? I was in the Czech Republic, and I moved at the beginning of June. Always live on Sunday with Ian? Yep, unless I'm traveling. So in fact, I may or may not be there this Sunday with Ian and Justin, because I'm actually going to Europe for a conference. And so my lives may or may not be, there may or may not be lives next week. And if they are, they might be at different times, just because I'll be on European time at a conference. So we'll see. What do you think of the many worlds theory? I think it's quite reasonable. Do you enjoy your work? I do. And in part, this is part of my work. So for those who don't know, and for those who are curious, the way that I fund, I'm currently applying for research positions at universities. I finished another research position at the end of May, and so now I'm applying for more. But in the meantime, the way that I'm funding my research, because everybody needs to eat, is that I'm doing science communication as like a part-time gig. So every morning I spend about 3 or 4 hours writing scripts, filming videos, doing debates, doing live streams, and that helps fund my research. And then, once noon hits until about 5, I'm spending time doing research, working on my academic projects, writing papers, etc. So in some sense, I'm self-funded. And I actually really like this because it feels like being a postdoc in that I don't really have a direct boss, but I make a lot more money. Well, not a lot more money. Well, okay, let me rephrase. When I was in the Czech Republic, I made less money, but the cost of living was lower, so I guess I made probably the equivalent amount of money. Anyway, not having a boss, being able to do science communication to fund my own research is a good deal. So I would recommend it. Well, it's not easy to do, but anyway, which is why like if I answer questions that people donate super chats for, because they're helping support my research, right? So currently I'm working on 2 projects, going to add a third soon. One project is on modeling Hawking radiation using quantum Riemannian geometry. The second project is on proving gap theorems for certain Einstein spaces. You lived in the Czech Republic. I did. Yes, I lived in Brno, which was a lovely place to be. I was a postdoc in Brno for 2.5 years. What do you write scripts for? Oh, I write scripts for my YouTube videos, for my TikTok videos, right? Would you prefer to just solely do this full time? No. No, I would never want to do just science communication, because then I wouldn't be doing the physics is my love. The science communication is, rank number 2. I'd rather do physics than science communication, if you will. Was realism fully debunked because of Bell inequality violations? No. Could be that locality was debunked. If you know history, England invaded what is called America today, but it isn't called America. Anyway, they always, okay, I don't know what that has to do with anything. You may not read my papers because that would be giving away my real name. What's the difference between a physics degree and an engineering physics degree? I don't actually know what makes up an engineering physics degree. Thank you for the Galaxy one called Medi. I appreciate that. Do physicists and other scientists make more than engineers, or does it greatly depend on the position? It greatly depends on the position, of course. So like you'll have like super high profile physicists who make like, you know, high 6 figures, low 7 figures. But the vast majority of physicists are going to make less than engineers. It's just a fact. Because engineers are closer to capital. They're closer to direct applications, so they're going to be compensated more. I have yet to see you hydrate this stream. I have hydrated twice, but I'll do it a third time. Oh, and Grimlock sent $15. Thank you, Grimlock. I didn't see that. Yeah, thank you so much. I appreciate that. Does the speed of light define what a meter is, or is it the other way around? Yes, the speed of light defines what a meter is. Yep. Are microwaves bad? Should not hold phones, also routers? No, microwave. I mean, I haven't seen compelling evidence that microwaves are bad. How come you don't share papers with us that you've written, like other science communicators who have written papers? I get death threats, and I'd rather people have to go through effort to find out who I am, because look, so there are a lot of science communicators that are open about their identity, and that's because they're relatively uncontroversial. I am, you know, I do. And not only do I do science communication, but as a, you know, as a guilty pleasure, I also do like debates. And some of those debates can get fairly heated. Some of them are on fairly controversial topics like religion or politics. And that can get people who hate you so much. And so I'd rather keep my professional identity separate from my social media identity. What are your thoughts of global warming? It's real. It's real, and most of the predictions have been right. Like the vast majority are. Like 17 out of 18 of the models in the past had correct science. What do you think is the next big discovery in the next few decades? If I could tell you that, then I would be busy here doing it. I would be busy doing it rather than being here. It's hard to predict these things. Gravity bends light, but photons are massless. Indeed. In fact, actually, and I'll give you guys a little sneak peek. So in a few weeks, I'm going to be starting in making some long-form YouTube videos. The plan is to do like maybe 1 or 2 a month. You know, 10, 20-minute long YouTube videos. My first video is about proving that light falls, and about using that fact to weigh the universe. That's what the first video is going to be about. I already have the script written. I just need to actually do some storyboarding and stuff like that. How do you go about getting a tenure track professorship from my position? Well, I'm still applying for postdoc positions this semester, or this cycle. I will be applying for some tenure track positions as well. So you just apply. I mean, like I have a fairly, not prolific, but a fairly reputable, I have a fairly good publication record. It's not stellar. It's not. I'm not a superstar. There are people who are far more spectacular than I am. But you apply. And like if there's somebody working on something that wants to work with me on something, then they might hire me. Didn't they just prove mass and photons? They did not. At least I haven't heard about this. That'd be groundbreaking though. Horizontal streams? Probably not horizontal streams. I think actually most streams do better on phones anyway, so I probably won't do that. Could you do some videos on nuclear physics? I don't know a lot about nuclear physics. I've done some TikTok videos on it, but I just haven't done any. I haven't done many recently. Favorite league group? SO3,1, probably. I mean, it's the one that we live in, right? Probably, anyway. How do you find a wife while doing a PhD? That's a good question. I didn't. I found a wife while being an undergrad. What book would you recommend a bachelor like me who learns special relativity, sees things like redshifts and pair production, crashes out how that would work in general relativity? I would read The Biggest Ideas in the Universe by Sean Carroll, Volume 1. Can lasers start fires? Yes, they can. I have lasers that can do it. covered dual spaces today in lecture. Why are they important in physics? Dual spaces, so if you're talking about like in a algebraic sense, dual spaces are, I don't know if they're useful. They're like essential. Basically, at least, so in relativity, anytime that you want to produce a scalar, scalars are like measurable things that we like to measure. You basically need some way to convert vectors, or you need some way to take vectors and produce scalars out of them. And the way that you do that is with their duals, right? So now you might have a metric around, and so you can take an inner product, or you might have some canonical dual spaces in other cases. Sorry, I just got a text message.
Audience that's upset.
Sorry. How do scientists believe in religion and science? Well, not a lot of them do. At least in some sense, like less than a majority do. And the very, very top scientists, the vast, vast majority do not. Is there an area of physics that you think would pertain to wildlife biology the most? Not that I can think of. Are you familiar with Sabine Hossenfelder and the controversy surrounding her? I am. I think that she has been audience captured. Do you know more than Sabine Hossenfelder? Maybe about some things. Sabine Hossenfelder, as much as I think that she is audience captured and is overly cynical, she is very knowledgeable. She knows a lot. I'm sure that there are things I know about that she doesn't know about, just because those are things I specialize in, but she is very, very knowledgeable. Can you explain how physicists froze light? How does light undergo phase change? They didn't freeze light. What they did is they passed light, they took light, and they passed it into I think it was like a rubidium gas or something like this. And then the light stopped being light and started being a polariton, which is a type of quasi-particle excitation that stopped. It just didn't move through space. And then they did something to it, and it kicked the light back out. Blood does not notice my comment. Well, thoughts on news where apparently they discovered a quantum something where we have 99% efficiency? That's so vague. How can I answer that? Why'd you beat me up in 7th grade? I was like 5'2" in 7th grade. I don't think I could beat up anybody. Can we generate energy using moving charge from radioactive element? Yeah, sure. You may as well use a thermoelectric generator, though. Since we are made up of atoms, is it possible to dissolve ourselves in the air atmosphere, travel at the speed of light, rearrange at a point, and invert teleportation? That's a lot of questions. I'm going to say no. What's your stance on the age of the Earth? Do you think that people to whom believe in young Earth have any validity? No, I don't think that they have any validity at all. Most of them have a fundamental misunderstanding of the science. Can we generate energy using moving charges from radioactive elements? I already answered that. Thoughts on fourth-dimensionalism and the Andromeda paradox? I don't know what fourth-dimensionalism means. Our universe is four-dimensional, 3 dimensions of space, 1 dimension of time. But I don't know what fourth-dimensionalism is. As far as the Andromeda paradox, I have a video on it, but if you want to learn more about it, you should absolutely go read up on something called relativity of simultaneity. I heard the universe was 26 billion years old and dark matter isn't real. Yeah, that was from one physicist who made that claim, and then the media ran with it, but most physicists think that he was just wrong. Thoughts on multiple dimensions of time? It seems inherently unstable. Oh, why does the speed of light change through different mediums? Because it's not light anymore. It stops being light and starts being a polariton excitation or some sort of quasi-particle. Why do prime numbers form frequency patterns when written out in grid form? Good question. How does the double slit experiment actually work? Everything is a wave. When you interact with the wave changes. What's the cosmological constant, please? Do you want the number? The number is like, what is it, 0.0006 joules per cubic meter or something? But the idea of the cosmological constant is merely that there is a certain amount of energy density that is present in every cubic meter of space. Do you know more than Kyle Hill on Because Science? Probably, at least about physics. Because he has an engineering background, I have a physics background, so of course I'm going to know more about physics than he will. But he probably knows more about other things than I do. From Maxim Ward with the 2 British pounds, is time dimension just another dimension of space? No, it's a dimension of time. It's different. Different dimension. Most of cosmology is theoretical. Well, there's observational cosmology and there's theoretical cosmology. Those are the two branches that you have. How does the coursework in mathematical physics differ from that in other fields of physics? Well, so the coursework will be the same coursework that you'll take. Well, I guess it depends on the school, right? So my school just had a PhD in physics, but you know, you're an experimental physicist if you do experiments, you're a theoretical physicist if you're a theorist, and you're a mathematical physicist if you do mathematics. So in some sense, I'm a mathematical physicist because that's what I do. That's the kind of physics that I do. But the coursework was my coursework was identical to the coursework that the theory people would take, or like the high energy theory people would take. I took string theory, I took, you know, I took various relativity courses and so on. Have you seen the guy that has made his entire YouTube personality around baiting you and Ian to debate him? Who? How many words per minute did you just type? I'm jealous. Oh, not that many. Is time really? Time seems to exist, yeah. What happens to all the photons lost in deep space? Do they combine and cause destructive interference? No, they just keep doing their thing. They don't necessarily combine destructive interference, or they don't necessarily destructively interfere, no. He streams above atheism is stupid banner and claims atheism is religion. What's his username? Because I may have seen him, but I don't think I've talked to him. Is heat death looking more likely based on current understanding? It's actually looking less likely than it used to be. Can something come from nothing? Depends on what you mean by nothing. Will more dimensions be added in time if we discover them, but otherwise no? Bigger fan of conformal or projective geometry? Oh, conformal geometry every day. Although a project that I'm thinking of taking on with a friend / colleague is a projective geometry one, so I'll have to learn that. Thoughts on herbal healing diagnoses with Eastern plants roots? Look, I'm not a biologist. I'm not equipped to comment, but my understanding is that when we find something that actually makes reproducible working results, instead of calling it herbal medicine or Eastern medicine, we just start calling it medicine. Like, as far as I'm concerned, like, you know, I don't think that there's this big conspiracy to shut down like working treatments. I think that doctors generally care about keeping people healthy, saving people's lives. I don't think that they would care where it comes from. I think that they just want to help people. At least most doctors. I'm sure that there are some that are not good. What's the most interesting idea, question, concept you've recently encountered in your work? There's a thought that Hawking radiation, when the black hole approaches, you know, when the black hole is almost done evaporating, the Hawking radiation increases dramatically. And there's a thought that we might be able to probe quantum gravity in that regime if we could ever witness a black hole evaporating. But I suspect we can't. What's your IQ? No idea. Why doesn't electron weight prove a creator? Why would electron weight prove a creator? What's inside a black hole? Nobody really knows for certain. Is no God a more reasonable argument than some kind of supernatural start to the universe as well? I suspect so, yeah. Were you always good in physics? I never even took a physics class till college. What do you think about IQ tests? I think that they probe something. I think that IQ tests generally correlate something with success. But I don't know how well they quantify general intelligence. All right, y'all, it's been an hour and almost 40 minutes. I feel like I'm going to lose my voice soon, so I'm going to end the live here. If you guys have been watching, thank you guys for watching. If you guys want to join the Discord server, there's a link in the description of the YouTube video that you're watching this on. There's also a link in the link tree in my bio on TikTok. If you want to click on it from TikTok, though, you have to make sure that you copy and paste the link into a browser, otherwise it won't work. And only join if you're 18 plus because the server is 18 plus. I don't want any, you know, I don't want children in there potentially getting exposed to, like, you know, naughty jokes. Anyway, yeah, so I'm gonna end the live here. Thank you guys for being so lovely today.